Why do nations trade? How do different theories explain trade flows? How is the international trade governed? And why do some countries liberalize their trade while others are more protectionist? Those are the questions that dominated the study about international trade, which will be addressed in this course, Politics of International Trade, with me, Poppy S. Winanti. In this session, we will discuss the evolution of the global trading system, starting from the birth and the failure of the International Trade Organization, and then the existence of the interim arrangement under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT. How international trade regime is governed as a mechanism to prevent war was one of the main issues negotiated by the winner states of the World War II. The discussion on how global political economy was managed had been started even before the World War II had ended. The negotiations on the global trade regime was conducted almost at the same time with the discussion on how monetary and financial sectors were managed. The negotiations on trade issue mostly centered on how to establish an international organization specifically dealing with the trade issues. The negotiations were conducted between 1943 and 1948, focusing on the connection between the availability of employment and trade policy, the reduction of tariffs and other trade barriers, as well as the minimizing all forms of trade discriminations. During the negotiation process, one of the most important issues was how trade liberalization through tariffs reduction, which based on non-discriminatory principle, can be compromised with a policy based on preferential principles, which were mainly adopted by previously known as colonial powers. When the establishment of the ITO was agreed, these countries also agreed that discriminatory practices and protectionism in international trade contributed to world war. With this understanding, the international trade under the ITO was expected to be governed by non-discriminatory and free trade or trade liberalization principles. Nevertheless, even though the ITO was already agreed, it never came into being due to the rejection by the US Congress. The rejection of the ITO by the US Congress can be understood through domestic politics analysis, which emphasizing the dynamics in domestic politics and also the struggle among domestic political actors. By utilizing domestic politics analysis, the rejections of the ITO represents the struggle of two dominant domestic political actors between internationalists versus protectionist groups in the US domestic politics. The protectionist groups concerned about the impact of trade liberalization for US economy and lack of its domestic producers' competitiveness. Considering the US is the major actor behind the establishment of the ITO, the rejection of the US Congress to ratify the ITO agreement has made other countries also reluctant to ratify it. As a consequence, ITO failed to be established. Unlike monetary and financial sectors that were managed under the Bretton Woods system, the failure of the ITO has resulted in the non-existence of international organizations that specifically manage international trade issues. Furthermore, international trade issue after the World War II was only managed limitedly under the interim mechanism under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, since the scope of the GATT was limited and it only focused on tariff reduction with no legally binding characteristics, especially if it compared to the design of the ITO. The GATT was considered as less harmful. Therefore, it was more acceptable by the protectionist groups in the US.